Hello everyone, we are on chapter 8 and I'm just going to talk about the addition. I'm not going to read it, but I'm just going to talk about what he is trying to say in this. So he starts off by talking about how the essential nature of thinking is difficult to grasp. And if anyone has ever done any other reading of Steiner, you'll know that he's mentioned that thinking is also involves a little bit of will and a little bit of feeling in it as well. Um, and so he says here that thinking is something that is very rich and it's very self-sustaining. And he says here, if we once succeed in really finding life in thinking, we shall know that swimming in mere feelings or being intuitively aware of the will element cannot even be compared with the inner wealth and the self-sustaining yet ever-moving experience of this life of thinking. Many people, he thinks, don't understand thinking and just see it as something that's very devoid of life. But Steiner in this paragraph is just pointing out that no, thinking is very rich and very much alive. He also points out that thinking is something that we grasp indirectly, because what we perceive are our thoughts, and we may not perceive ourselves directly thinking, but it's because we're dealing with thoughts that are, after the fact that we've done thinking. That's also part of why it just seems sort of devoid of life, because we're dealing with the aftermath of thinking, which is the thoughts. And he's also pointing out that there's no other activity of the human soul that is so easily misunderstood as thinking. For him, thinking, its real nature is warm, luminous, and penetrating deeply into the phenomena of the world. And he says here, this penetration is brought about by a power flowing through the activity of thinking itself, the power of love in its spiritual form. So that's a very unusual idea that he brings up, because normally we wouldn't associate thinking with the power of love in its spiritual form, but that is what he is arguing here as well. He says here, again as I mentioned earlier, if we turn towards thinking in its essence, we find in it both feeling and will, and these in the depths of their reality. So he wants us to recognize that, thinking has in it feeling and will. He also finally says, if we are ready to experience thinking intuitively, we can do justice to the experience of feeling and of will. So just merely having feelings and will, it doesn't really do justice to that experience unless we permeate it with thinking. And then that's when we take our level of feeling and the will to a higher level, if you will. So he's just pointing out here that thinking isn't just some, cold activity. For him, it's a spiritual activity, and it's the power of love in its spiritual form. That's a very big statement that he makes in that paragraph. But overall, in chapter 8, I'll just mention what he's trying to do. So this whole chapter, he calls it the factor of life. And he's pointing out that we are in reality thinking, feeling, and willing beings. And we are not just merely conceptual beings. And because of that, other philosophers think, well, let's try making the realm of feeling or the realm of willing as our principles of knowledge. And he's just basically pointing out that these are not appropriate instruments of knowledge, and that this is not correct, because they're very subjective experiences, and we can understand why they have been considered as something that should be an instrument of knowledge, because it is something that we can experience directly. But it's not until we permeate this with thinking that is when it becomes a universal principle. Otherwise, feelings and the will are very subjective experiences. So that's basically what this edition and chapter 8 is all about. So that's all we're going to discuss in this session. So Chapter 9 is really long, so I'm hoping as well that you guys are summarizing the paragraphs on your own and really just work with the paragraphs one paragraph at a time as well, but don't get too bogged down with them. And sometimes he does, if you have questions about a paragraph, sometimes he does talk about it in the next paragraph. So focus on a paragraph, but don't focus too much, otherwise you might miss overall what he's trying to say. So keep working on summarizing the paragraphs. Have a good day, guys. Bye.